Welcome to the Old Man Orange Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunnigan.
And we decided today, which is actually something I've always kind of wanted to do, but is to go back to those original Ninja Turtles comics. The Eastman and Laird ones from the 80s, the ultra classic ones. The comics that are really that thing that like is big and as popular as Ninja Turtles is, you're pretty hard pressed to actually find people that go out and read these books. Like you can meet people that like Ninja Turtles is fucking life, but they have still not read the original comics.
Well, when I was a kid, I remember hearing people talk about like, oh my God, the Ninja Turtle comics are so dark and gritty and so like messed up. And then I believed it. I took that to heart. And even as a kid, I was like, wow, I'm surprised they made this super Saturday morning toy-centric show off the super gritty and dark comic. And you read it, you're like, okay, yeah, it's like grittier. It's like PG-13 level, but it's not like it's not like The Boys or Spawn or something like that, you know?
Yeah, well, I know that's the thing. Is they definitely like. I feel like it's one of those ones because you look at these Ninja Turtles books and you go, it's pretty much all like the bread and butter's all there. You know what I mean? It's they make it out like it was like a radical change. I'm like, nah, not really. Maybe it's just more gritty because it's like in black and white, so it gives it like that noir kind of look to it. You know, but
they're less cowabunga.
Yeah, it's like the comedy and like the surfer attitudes kind of toned down, but it's still there. It's not like it's not there. It's just not all over the place. You know what I mean? They are a little bit more serious and everything like that. But one of the most interesting things is you read that first issue and it's like, it's almost amazing how accurate that movie sort of is. Like that movie really does not stray that far from the comic in a weird way. The original like live action Ninja Turtles movie.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing is after all the years of people talking about the comic and how the comics are so different, maybe at some point the transition happens, but hearing how different the comics were and then reading it like, oh, right, tone, yeah, it's darker. But then I was like, oh, I knew the story all along. I mean, I heard like a few years back, the movie is basically the first comic like expanded upon, but looking and reading just the first 3 issues in the Raph standalone, I was like, oh, this is like, I know all these stories. These are stories I do know. So it's just like kind of like surprising how the Saturday morning cartoon just did the G version of all this shit.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because as this thing kind of goes, like I think one of the coolest things about the Ninja Turtle series, I mean, even the cartoon does it as well too, but like is how at first it does it, then it kind of goes into, repeat. But is how every single issue starts just going to different places. Like, even as we go farther along, like there's like a long gap in this comic series where like the Ninja Turtles don't even come back to like New York for like, it seems like a good couple of books. Like that's how long they're like out of New York. Like the New York thing's only like the beginning. And then they're out like, on the road and away and in different dimensions and all this kind of stuff. Like right off the bat, like that's not even like one of those ones where it's like X-Men where it's like that came like, in the 80s. And so it's like, no. Like that's like right there from the beginning. They're already fighting Triceratons and things like that. I mean, not these first issues. We're doing the 1, 2, 3, and we're doing the Raph mini issue, which I love how it's like, it's got like, it's a single issue. It says it right there on there, but it's like, it has a number 1 on it.
Yeah. Well, it's also kind of like, well, I think also that was that point, like, dude, number 1 issues have good resale value. So that was the thing. I think everybody was, because leading up to the 90s, everybody was starting to put number 1s or just reprints or be like, this is number 1. That's why they have that so often. So like people are fucking stupid. They'll go out and buy it.
Well, it's that kind of thing though. Like also like when you go to a comic book store too, and you see like number 37, you're like, well, I guess I'm not catching up on this now. It gives that like threatening look to it. Where I think when it's like number 1, it's like, oh, I could jump in here. This is a good place to jump in at. You know what I mean? It's safe. I could catch the next ones. I'm not going to be missing issues.
Yeah, exactly that. But then you get really confused because you're like, wait, that's number 1 of Daredevil, but it's came out this year and. You start doing the math, you pick it up. They're mentioning all this shit from like the 80s. Like, oh, okay. So I'm imagining, I feel like sometimes I think maybe you're like, well, it's already in my hands, so I guess I'm buying it.
Yeah. Well, there's that classic thing that once you put it in your hands, it's already like the chances of setting it down have gone down by like 75%.
Yeah. Something to that effect.
But the other thing I just love about these old Ninja Turtles comics, though, the artwork in them is like amazing. Like I think that like it's just so coolly detailed, stylized, and the way that they draw, it's like it's one of those ones that like very few other comics are ever drawn this way, where it's like both Eastman and Laird both draw together. So they just like pick different panels, and that's how they sort of choose how they draw it. And it just sort of fuses all together, which I think is just such a cool concept of probably knocking things out. It's not the old one person pencils, one person inks. It's like, no. They both do everything.
I didn't know they both do everything, but now that I'm looking at that, because it is interesting, because I feel like someone, I don't know who, but I feel like at least for the first issue, the turtles are in a very distinct style, and they look different from like the way everything else looks. Not just because of they're turtles and the others are people, but I mean just from like they almost look like a different art style inside of another book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I think it's kind of also you got the first. They're probably trying to figure. You're figuring everything out in that time period of how everything's going to look. And then by 2 and 3, I think you're like, okay, now we kind of know how our style is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's also interesting because this is where they're all kind of almost the same personality for a little while. Maybe Raphael was a little bit more hard-headed, but on average, like Leo was the leader, Raphael was the hard-headed one, and Donnie and Mikey hadn't really got their personalities down just yet, but even Raphael and Leo weren't that far apart. So it's kind of, plus they all had red bandanas. So, I mean, I guess in black and white, it doesn't really matter so much. And it would be, I noticed there's that thing where if they weren't holding their weapons, somebody would have to address them by their name.
Yeah, there's always kind of that. And it's funny because Eastman would always say, like, we always kind of knew who they were, but I guess everybody else was just confused by it.
I guess that's also makes it, well, it doesn't matter who's who for a little while, you know?
Mm-hmm. Because you're just trying to figure out who these Ninja Turtles are. But as it goes on, it's like they finally kind of get it where, like, I think it's the part where, like, April's got, like, a computer and Donnie comes in going, like, oh, hey, I know how to use this thing. And it's kind of like, okay, there you go. Donnie's does machines.
Well, I think it's even in the second issue, I think, is where they start to kind of get them down more, because they're all still very self-serious. And here's the thing, I think, because when I first heard, because I'll be honest, for the longest time I didn't know the Turtles was kind of a parody on Frank Miller's work and other things.
Yeah, I'm gonna. You know what's funny is I was listening to a podcast recently that had Peter Laird on there. And they brought that up about like, oh, there's a parody thing. And he's like, it was actually never a parody. We really like the Frank Miller stuff. We actually took it serious. It's the people that reviewed it thought it was a parody. So that's how that kind of got taken out, is everybody kept saying, oh, it's a parody on all this stuff. And it's like, oh, we were just going for some serious. We just thought this was cool shit. We didn't ever think of it as a parody.
Okay,
we played it straight, but everybody looked at it like, oh my gosh, they're doing parody on all this kind of stuff.
Okay, well that makes sense, because I was going to say they really commit, because it's one of those things I was going to say. They parody it so hard, it seems like it takes itself very seriously, but I think they're just laughing at the concept of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they're doing all like, because how Frank Miller like did the deep dive into like what is a Batman, So I think it was so it was like yeah, no, I guess we're famous now. We're millionaires, so we can just say it. It was never meant to be funny, but here we are. So thanks for buying all the shit.
Yeah, because that's what it was. He's like, we actually took it kind of serious, but I think everybody else there was just people that just couldn't. They're like, what? It's got to be goofy if it's got like, look at that title. You know what I mean? And we're just like, yeah, we just thought it was cool. We were just gonna go kind of this like old school, almost like 60s comics with it and so on, but then give it like the darker edge of like Frank Miller and what have you.
Well, then I'm also thinking it's kind of like Plan 9 from outer space, but everything worked out.
Yeah, because Plan 9's not supposed to be a comedy. It's literally, he made it serious. It's just when you shoot a movie in 3 days.
And it's one of those things where it happened. Like, granted, people love that movie. But it's one of those things where it just like, instead of people like, look how fucking stupid it is, like, dude, there's marketability behind this. Like, you guys made something really fucking goofy and wacky. We did. We thought we were making some. Oh yeah. We totally did. It's for the kids. Yeah, it's for the kids. And then later they like, all right, let's go back and actually edge this shit up a little bit, like on the comic side.
Well, yeah, because that's the thing is it's like it's almost like it's made for like technically like 20-year-old comic readers of like the 80s, but then it's like it's like once like the marketing comes by and kind of says, hey, we can sell this to 10-year-olds instead. Not saying that it doesn't work in every single avenue. It's like Batman can be sold in a sense to like a 5-year-old kid all the way to like a 95-year-old man who's like, I remember the days when Batman would punch Nazis in the face and carry a gun.
Take this, you dirty non-Christian, bam.
And when the boy still, didn't wear pants the way that all boys are intended to be. Okay, grandpas, that's enough there. No, that's how boys should be. I want all my boys at school to be wearing Speedos. So when I drive by, I can stand there and enjoy the view.
Just look at those running muscles. Look at all those calves. Like, okay, Grandpa. No, I was really into track. And it's good to know that the kids can run fast. Well, they got a reason to run fast when you're around. Shit.
Oh, Grandpa. He's like, it was a different time. You weren't allowed to look at boys' legs. You had to, say something about like how athletic they were or something like that.
You still can't look at him, Grandpa. You still can't.
For all the different reasons now.
Not in Obama's America. Like, should we tell him? Like, no, he'll figure it out. It comes in waves. But
yeah,
back
turtles.
to this. Turtles. What was I gonna say? So the thing about this is shit. Yeah, right. Fucking throw me off this old senile grandpa character. I think that something's interesting is because something that Turtles became known for in the late 80s and through the early 90s was how crazy the marketing and all the tie-ins and all the toys and all that stuff was. It's interesting getting to the back of these books and like, hey guys, so special order, you can call this number or send us your address and we'll send you like iron-on decals of the characters so you can put on a T-shirt or something. Like the idea of like, hey, we made about 20 of these. You could probably, they probably won't sell too quickly. We have about 20, so then like just maybe a year, 2 years later, like it's on like cereal boxes. They got a movie. There's a cartoon.
Well, that's like the weirdest thing about Ninja Turtles. It's like that's one of those things. It's like it didn't really take that long to get popular because literally, like the books, I think what is like 85. So at the earliest, it's kind of started to be put together in 84. So like that first run of books is like 85. Well, that TV show is 87, which means that thing probably got started working on in 86. So it's like in 1 year they go from doing like, hey, let's just try this little independent comic thing, and then all of a sudden it's like ginormous turtle mania for the late 80s.
Yeah. I talked about this before last time we were doing something Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle oriented, but there was a documentary that was on YouTube. There's actual very little narration. They almost just there'd be some, but they mostly just took archive footage and let the archive footage speak for itself. And it was between, interviews with Eastman and Laird and producers, and then it showed news segments about like, what's this turtle mania the kids are talking about, and then they'd show like old ads, then clips of the show, and then maybe some little bit of context. I understand why so many parents hated it back then. Because the level of things that were coming out nonstop so much at once, it is something that probably needed like 8 years to cool down and make people nostalgic for it. I mean, it never totally went away, but like it ran into the ground, and then it kind of like still had its hardcore fans. You still had kids watching whatever new show came out of it, and then it built back up.
Yeah, because it's like Turtles, one of those weird ones that it didn't really. I mean, it petered out. I guess you would say maybe a little bit towards like the late '90s, because that's when there wasn't really a whole lot of Turtle stuff. Like after Ninja Turtles 3, the movie, and after the show ended, I think in '97, I want to say the original show. And then there was about like a 4-year period till I think the 2000 show came out. I guess you could almost say there's that little bit there, but I never remembered as a kid like Turtles just sort of disappearing. Like it felt like it was still always kind of there. You could always go to the toy aisle and you'd still see Turtles there. Even once the anime stuff started coming in, it still was kind of right next to it. It always was sort of kind of there. And then, once that 2000 show came out, that in a sense kind of re-infused some turtle like DNA into like a new generation. I remember when that show came out, there was that arms crossed, like, is this my Ninja Turtles? I don't know about this. And then funny, like now I watch it nowadays, I'm like, this show's actually kind of the better one. Let's be honest. Like, no wrong, I love the old one. The old one's amazing for its nostalgic, and that first season's super good. And then there's, other parts between there. But that new one, I feel, or like new one, let's be honest, new one as in 5 shows ago by now. The 2000s one is it's one of those ones I feel like that kind of captures the turtle essence probably best out of any of the shows ever.
It's one of those things where it was my favorite thing in the world when I was a kid, and by probably second grade or so, I probably let go of it. Not that I disliked it. I just felt I got more into Mario and Sonic by that point, and Batman. But in Turtles is one of those things I kind of come back to if there's a new movie coming out, and then once in a while we'll pick up the comics. And I wouldn't mind checking out the 2003 show, but what I do remember back on the old cartoon is I remember like moments in certain episodes. I probably cannot tell you a whole lot. I remember certain just moments in the vibe of it, but oh right, that character. But it's one of those things where thinking back on it, it's like I think because it was really trying to just push a toy. Like here's a villain we can make a toy off of, and you're never going to see this character again. Maybe a season or now he might come back. Maybe. Because that's what most of the figures were after a while. Like toys of one-shot villains,
And then variants on those where it's like, because that was the big thing about Ninja Turtles is like how many variants. It's like, okay, we got the turtles in their regular outfits. Then we got them in Wild West gear. Then we got them in futuristic gear. Then we got
Star Trek.
Yeah. Then we got, Star Trek. Like it just, and I mean, like
slasher villains.
Many great things fall into that once they have like that, sort of Turtle Mania, Beetle Mania, Pokemon when it was coming out, where like they're just selling so much shit at once that like, and I feel like that's like the death sense to like parents. And I think parents sometimes are the ones that like end up like doing the thing where they're like, okay, we got to tell these kids, how we tell these kids that this thing's pretty lame?
Yeah.
Like just so we can stop buying it for them. I feel like parents are the ones that signs in there. Like the kids don't know it, but they're the ones that actually fuel into that to break it. Be like, we can break into this child's psyche and get them off of this.
Yeah. Well, it's also something to the effect of like seeing like I remember the Baxter Stockman episode as a kid. And seeing that in this, because I remember Baxter Stockman being like a nerdy, like, oh, and this, like, oh, okay, he's like I didn't know he was originally a black character until the until like the second Michael Bay movie come out. I'm like, oh, they they got Tyler Perry playing him. Like, well, he was originally black. Was he like a nerdy fly guy? Like he never turned into a fly in the comics. Oh, he didn't? Shit. There goes all my turtle knowledge, so
it's funny in this way. I will say, like, this is like just a reference for us, but like he looks like Carlo, Cisco's dad in the
he does.
Got the circular glasses and the mustache and everything like that. I was like, boy, this is like Carlo drawn as a comic book character.
Well, it's even to the degree of like Carlo, and then like April O'Neil wasn't even originally meant to be a redhead. So that's just all this stuff that we immediately assume about turtles is just came from more like the show, the first show. So because I think whoever drew April, she was intended to be like she was based off one of their girlfriends, one of the artist's girlfriends, and I think she was like half black, half Asian, something to that effect. So, but in the black and white, it's kind of hard to tell as it goes on. It can kind of be, it's kind of hard, like other than what's his name, Stockman. It's kind of hard to tell who anyone's supposed to really be at the end of the day. Like, is that guy Asian, or is he just really angry right now? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like April. It's like she's got the O'Neill name. I mean, that always gives away that it's got to have some Irishness to it. So, but like she's almost drawn like she's almost like Italian. I mean, everybody's like in New York and so on like that. So there is definitely that kind of going on. One of the other big things too is like right off the bat, you got the battle of Splinter or not Splinter with Shredder, and the interesting thing is that first issue is done. Like if that was the only like story, like it could be a one and done story. Like it's a full, complete, act 1, 2, 3 arc, told in like give or take 40 pages. But like They literally like kind of they finish off they finish off Shredder right out kind of right there, and like he once again doesn't return for a long time in the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was something that was kind of weird because when you think about that, it's like the very first issue of Detective Comics that Batman's in. It's like something to the effect of like he stopped some gangsters. Maybe it was a mad scientist. I don't remember, but he stopped some gangsters or mad scientists. It wasn't Joker. It wasn't anyone like that. And then like, you know what? That was the first one, so we're just going to use that villain a lot. And like, well, we got all these other guys over here. No, he's in the first one. I mean, he's the first villain. He's always going to go up against this one guy. And it's been so long since I read it, but I think it was just some miscellaneous random gangster. And it just sounds so like weird. The idea that like, oh, the guy he beat in the first issue, we're going to use that for every villain for every like movie from now on.
Yeah, well, I mean, like that's kind of the downfall to like the original show is that at first it starts off and it's changing all the time and whatnot. It's got all kinds of different story elements and they're going all different places. But once it gets like I want to say like seasons 3, 4, maybe even 5, it just does that thing where it's just the Turtles just battle Shredder like every single episode, and it's just like, dude, like get some other villains in here, get some other stuff. Like you can't just have like a whole season, like 24 episodes where like maybe you get some, like, the only other person is maybe Krang and so on like that, but it's just like that was always, I think that would bother me as a kid. Like when it's just like they're battle the exact same people over and over and over again in a cartoon show. It's like, I don't know. Does it's like, did adults just think that was like fine to have? Like, do they just think like, oh, kids are stupid. Like they don't need to have that many characters. Like, no. I think everybody likes multiple characters.
I think the 80s is a time where they didn't. I mean, I'll be 100% honest. I mean, not saying there weren't people that worked on these shows that didn't care, but I honestly don't think they really respected the intelligence of a lot of kids. I think they just like kids want the toys. They just want the toys, so we're going to give them the toys. I mean, you've heard the guy in the
Transformers one.
I know the kid was going to cry because he killed off his favorite character 3 minutes into the movie. Get over it, you little bitch. Your dad's going to have to buy you a Rodimus Prime now, or the fuck you kids like. I don't know. I don't like this shit. I just make money off it. Like,
I love that they just interviewed that guy. Just the way he talks.
It's like flicks his cigar out on a puppy or whatever. But the thing is, like, because you look at a lot of those shows, and I think in time you have people that like grew up with it, but like, let's expand upon this. You know what I mean? I think it's what happened with a lot of cartoons in like the late 80s, early 90s. Is I think what happened to a lot of comic books, like, because a lot of comic books in the 40s and 50s is like there are people that cared about them, but a lot of the comics are being made like it's just silly cartoon shit to sell to kids. And then people that grew up with it, like, we can expand on this. And then it's where you got like that second wave of really good like DC comics in the 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what happened with a lot of 80s and 90s stuff. You have people late 80s, early 90s that saw some of that and then they expanded upon that. Not maybe those exact franchises, but down the line, that's why you got people still making variations of Turtles. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if I watch some of the newer Turtles. It wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if the 87 Turtles is the worst one. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Well, because I've read like there's a lot of people that are like big Turtles fans, and they watch the Nickelodeon, like the CG ones and all that stuff, and they love the living daylights out of them. I mean, older than us guys, so like. So those ones are still working well, you know what I mean? As I said, like I feel like the 2003 one, like if there was a definitive, like you wanted to go and watch a whole arc, I think that's the one to go with. Now, as I always say, that first season of the 80s Ninja Turtles, though, that first season, it's only 6 episodes long, but like the pilot episodes, I guess you would say, that one's amazing. It gives you all the nostalgic. It tells a really good story. It actually is told in like, it's like a movie arc. Like it literally should just be combined into like a movie because of, whatever, 6 episodes at 20 minutes each. That's pretty much literally like just a little over 2 hour long movie. It tells kind of like the original comic book story, just, expanded a little bit and kind of does that. But it's so good. It's so good. It's just, as I said, like as it kind of goes on, there's like those middle seasons. Like it gets better once it gets towards the end. Like I want to say between like seasons 6 and 7, that's when they started figuring out like, okay, we're in the mid 90s now. We're competing with Batman and X-Men and Spider-Man. We gotta. I think that like they started to up the game there on the kind of like the last couple seasons. But there's that part where it's like, I think it's before Batman the Animated Series and stuff comes out, where it's just like they get the kind of lazy run with it, just like milk this show. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just create a new character so you can sell a toy off that character.
And there's rarely new characters. That's the thing, is a lot of times there's so much it's just Shredder over and over and over again. There's like a couple of seasons where it's just like, dude, like, is that all this is? I mean, like, I know I like Dragon Ball Z, and that's got the same battle that happens for an entire season, but
the episodes I remember, just they or if it was Krang, like they'd reach into like Dimension X and pull someone out, or to be some kind of test subject or something. That's what I remember. Now, granted, it's been over 20 years since I've even seen a clip of the like old 80s show, but reading this comic, because when we got to the Baxter Stockman one, there is something like I was like, oh, okay, he's just reading this, like, okay, I kind of remember this episode. Yeah, he was making the Mousers, and I even remember in the cartoon being like, that robot just eat a mouse? I remember thinking that as a kid, thinking like, that's pretty fucking gnarly. And they make it more gnarly in the comic. There's a little bit, it's not like horrendous, but you actually see blood coming out of the side of the thing's mouth. And then I didn't know this. This taught me something. April O'Neil started off as his assistant, which I didn't know. I always assumed she was a journalist, but yeah, I thought that was interesting right there.
Well, you know what it reminds me of? Whenever I see that second issue, I feel like the cartoon probably looked to be like, okay, see that, like, okay, there's April O'Neil there. See that other lady that's a journalist next to her that just kind of goes away? What if we just fuse those two characters together?
It was probably something kind of like that. Like, what if she's just investigating? Well, that even makes a little bit more sense because, like, because I don't know. We have to read more. We only read up to 3 in the single Raph issue. But I could see it being something degree of like, all right, how are we going to explain away her involvement with sinking an entire building with people in it, and the World Trade Center is next, so and then you also have the whole part where, like, how do you explain that away? Like, what if she's an investigative reporter and just fumbles her way into it? Like that almost, I can see movie wise why or I'm not sure if that's what they do in the cartoon. I don't remember, but it wouldn't surprise me if you were adapting this, if that's how they fall into it. That's probably what they're going to fall into with the new one coming out, something to that effect. Because Baxter Stockman, they haven't shown anything for Shredder. I think Baxter Stockman's the villain of the next movie.
Yeah, which kind of weird they're going Baxter Stockman again, just because he was just in the last.
But he's got like a whole army of mutants.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be kind of cool then. But yeah, no, it's interesting because April's she's just a little bit different in this one. Instead, she's almost more like she's a computer programmer, what I mean? And but she still has like the antique shop and all that stuff where they gotta stay next. Which literally, it's the other thing that's kind of weird in the comics is, once again, they're out of the sewer like by issue 2, and then they don't go back to the sewer for like a very long time. It's funny how these things that, like, you picture like, oh, that's this turtle's trademark, that's their bat cave and all this kind of stuff like that, and like a lot of this stuff comic book wise, like they have this show where it's just like, we're just going places. That's the thing about the comic book series. It's like, that's what makes it kind of so interesting, is it like it's always going somewhere brand new, like each issue almost.
This isn't your first time reading these comics, right? You've read these before?
No, because I literally have the entire. I bought the whole set one time. I got this one, and then they had like on sale when they used to have Comixology, because you don't get the good sales like you used to. But they were $5 a piece for every single one of these omnibuses, so I bought every single one of the Eastman and Laird section. And I read all through them maybe about 6 or 7 years ago or something like that. Is when I read all through them, and I was like, man, they're so good. As time goes on, that they start to get outside artists and writers and so on in there, and it's still decent, but like the first like 3 books or so, when it's just both those guys and maybe a couple like assistants as it goes on, like those are some of the best stories.
Well, I really do. There is something just very raw about their art style as these go on, and it happens to any independent artist, because you look at the first issue and the artwork's great and all, but it does have that early indies kind of grimy grittiness to it. But you see so much improvement just by the second issue, and by the second issue, and this one like spread panel is kind of where I think they help kind of get it still has kind of like that weird like thick lines, a lot of grit on everything, but at the same time, like they get across like just all the turtles' personalities in this one scene. They have to address each other by name for the ones who aren't like with weapons, but Leo he's reading Dune, and he's being like, I haven't even stopped and look at all the other books on the wall. I'm sure it's a bunch of other stuff, but he's sitting there reading Dune, so showing he's a little bit more like little bit more, I guess, like focused and whatnot. Donnie is working computers, so it's already getting across that okay, he's already the tech guy. And then Raph and Mikey are just dicking around practicing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like, while Splinter's watching his soap operas.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they have the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. They have. I'm trying to look at all this stuff on there.
Yeah, there's a bunch of cool martial arts, and there's of course kind of some Roman and Greek books on there on art history, and
yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I think that's what I love about their artwork. Their artwork has such great detail throughout it, and that duotone kind of paper chemical stuff that they use for it doesn't have it's not like toning in a sense like what it's in a manga where you have in the olden days it was you cut out those dot sheets and then some poor chap has to glue those on or whatever you have to do to get those going there the low end job of the manga studio. But it's like a paint, so it's that makes that duotone stuff that became illegal after a long time because one of the many things that probably caused people to die.
Yeah.
all that stuff, which is funny.
How to do this in a respirator.
Yeah, exactly. You're not supposed to be breathing that stuff in, but just that whole look, it's amazing. There's only 4 tones going on here. It's a Game Boy palette. There's literally black, white, light gray, and darker gray. But in that, there's so much depth and detail and design that it almost kind of puts shame to a lot of other comic books, just how much is going on in these issues,
Well, it's one of those things, just looking at it, and keep in mind, this is not me, because, they are both infinitely better artists than I am. So don't take, but I guess you see kind of the indiness in the way of because the level of detail, the angles, all that. I mean, there's one I'll come across later, and this isn't me trying to bring it down. Let's go to page 17 and point out this one panel that looks kind of weird like that. But
yeah,
I noticed the facial expressions are usually kind of they can't really do as much. So there's sometimes that thing okay, that looks probably a little indie-ish right there. You can tell that's probably, I mean, they've been drawn for years, obviously. But as far as that seems like something you would see an early indie book, lack of facial expressions, or they're whenever they have different positions for the characters, they look great. But there's I don't think it's issue 2, which I'm looking at here. I think it's issue 3. There's a shot somewhere in issue 3. I think it's after they get done with the car chase through Central Park, and there's I think it's one of the last pages, and there's someone there's a whole group of people just on the street, and it looks good. It's kind of one of those things. I feel weird pointing this out, but it's because it all looks good, but everyone's kind of in the same facing the camera the same way in the same position. You know what I mean? It's those kind of things just kind of stand out.
Well, yeah, because there is some small things where just from certain angles and certain things it might be kind of off, but I feel everything else that kind of makes up for that is just the ridiculous amount of detail that you would probably even, I'll say, at this same time period of Marvel and DC, you probably aren't getting this amount of detail. Now, granted, that's probably because those guys are get these issues out. We're on a tight schedule. You know what I mean? Where technically when you're making these, together, they're making them on your own. You're trying to make them stand out more. So you're going to put a little bit more extra effort into them. And especially once this book just sold right off the bat and you go, shit, well, I guess we can make number 2 and here we go.
Actually, I found it. It's actually not the end. It's the beginning. It's the back cover of the third issue, and it's kind of it's all the people on the street just kind of stand there. The level of detail and everything is great. And once again, this isn't me bringing it down. I'm just saying this is one of those things that it almost looks like something you'd see on a indie band's artwork or something, or a poster they'd be putting out around the 80s or the early 90s. You know what I mean? Come see our show. It'd have an art style kind of like this,
Oh yeah, no, it definitely has that, kind of look going on to it's a very punk rock look the whole way through of Ninja Turtles and what have you. But it's just, it's that's the thing is I wish, because every once in a while you'll get a book and you'll see okay, I think it was on that Raphael Old Man Logan one that we read, or not Raphael, Michelangelo Old Man Logan, but what the heck was it called again?
It's called The Last Ronin.
The Last Ronin. There was just a couple moments where I think Kevin Eastman and maybe Peter Laird did a couple little pieces, or they did some of the flashbacks, but it's one of those ones I feel I know that they don't really want to do it because they probably, you know, but it's like, I would love just to see them do that whole entire book in their style. To me, that always just feels more like that's almost how the Ninja Turtles should look, is that. Not saying that the other guys don't do a good job, but like their artwork is so cool and so unique. It's kind of like almost like sometimes like the way that like it's, you know, it's almost like the way that Frank Miller's kind of artwork was, because let's be honest, Frank Miller's artwork's one of those ones too where like it could be a very roll of the dice on some of his ones. You can see some stuff, you go, man, that panel looks amazing, and he looks like another panel like, what the hell happened there? Like, that is that even the same guy? You know what I mean? But it's almost like the older I get, the more I kind of go like, I like that. I like the fact that Frank Miller's stuff can almost just look so off from everything else because it's so unique looking, and then like the way that he goes about it. And even if his stuff maybe isn't like, you know, what you would call comic book perfect, like that almost kind of makes it more interesting because it is different.
Yeah, it's such a big difference between, you see his art style he did back when he was just an artist, like on like
the Daredevil,
Wolverine, like Daredevil or like Wolverine, and then he jumps over to like Batman in Dark Knight Returns, and it's so just like hulkish and brutish and all that. Granted, he didn't draw year one, but he wrote for it. But then when you get to like, you know, how like clunky and hulky Batman is in Dark Knight, how he just doubles down and turns everyone into a fucking freak by like Strikes Again, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's just so, it was weird. It's like, I remember when I got that Daredevil book of Frank Miller's, like I really thought that was going to have that Frank Miller look. And then I was like, when I first got, I'm like, he didn't draw this. It literally looks like any book. Yeah, I think it is Born Again. It's like one of those ones. It did not look like Frank Miller's artwork. It looked like it was kind of like straight out of like, you know, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. You know, it's like one of those ones. It looked just like it was like any run of the mill like Marvel comics of like that, like the 70s. You know, and it's just kind of weird because it's like it almost. I hate to sort of say it, like it's almost like he drew things better, I guess, in the Daredevil, but they look so much more unique in like his, you know, work to follow, like the Dark Knight Returns and Ronin, you know, and 300 and things like that.
I'm wondering if it's just one of those things of just like Stan Lee, just like, all right, Frank, listen here, True Believer, you got to do it. You got to do it the Marvel way. The Marvel way is the correct way. Like, well, I was thinking about just trying something really artsy. No, you know, just like we do it the fucking Marvel way because that's what they come in for. Okay, True Believer. Do you believe a man can fly? Because you're about to find out when you go out that fucking window, you know. And then you know, he gets over to DC and he's like, hey guys, can I draw whatever I want? Yeah, draw whatever you want. Cool. Can I do some cocaine too? Yeah, right off the table. Go do it. Let's see what happens.
You can go do it off Dennis O'Neill's dick.
Yeah. Hey. I had a mild cocaine habit in the 70s, a mild one. I remember he was like a Batman on Batman years back, and when he said that, like I think he was, it had to be fat. Who else would he say that to? Yeah, I probably wouldn't say that in the middle of a
DC like special features on the Dark Knight Returns disc.
Yeah, so which made you want to do Traveling Heroes? Well, I was on a bender with what's his name? I can't believe I'm trying to blank on his name. Neil
Adams?
Neil Adams, yeah. I got a fucking autographed picture right here. I can't even fucking remember his name.
Yeah, one of those ones like that. But that's the thing, is like that, because that's the thing is I like when it comes to comic books, I appreciate the art that doesn't look like anything else. I think that's the most important thing. If you got artwork that doesn't look like anybody else's, I think that's always way cooler than having stuff that looks picture perfect. It's like, you know, it's all those like those Marvel and DC books that kind of like, they're generally not the biggest books, and they're not like the experimental books. They're kind of like the middle of the road books where they're just telling a normal story, and there's nothing wrong with that artwork. Don't look bad, but it just looks like you went to school and you never got personality. You know, I kind of, you know, I kind of hate to sort of say it.
They're the ones where it's kind of like, it's hard to, I can't think of any off the top of my head, like any particular artist. Maybe that's the point. But there's a lot of those artists that they're really good. They can draw way better than I can. They got, you know, but they get the point across, but I can't really tell you if it's their artwork when I immediately see it, or I feel like if I see, you get the people that they kind of look like it's status quo, but you can still kind of tell it's them. Mm-hmm. Someone like Andy Kubert, like I feel like his artwork looks kind of like I don't think it's too weird or too bland. I think it's that's right at that sweet spot. Same thing with Jim Lee, even though a lot of people ape and try to be Jim Lee,
Yeah.
but then you also have like people where it's like John Romita Jr., who I love his art style, but it took me a minute to like his art style because it has that kind of like that blocky Frank Miller'ness to it. And I originally wasn't a fan of his, but then as time came around, I found myself really liking his art a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So some of those ones is just kind of how it goes about it. But yeah, it's just like the Ninja Turtles one. It's just like you look through, like there's so many just cool splash panels and action stuff in there and what have you. And then when we get to even like the third issue, they got the big old like VW bus, like the proto turtle van kind of chase scene. And I know that like that was one of those ones that they said they're like, you know what? They always said that you're never supposed to do a car chase scene like in comic books. And it's kind of funny because I've seen them in like multiple comic books, but like, like at this time period, I think that was like the thing is like that was like the taboo is you don't do a car chase in a comic book. Like that's going to be so weird. It's going to be stilted feeling and so on like that. So like we want to make the biggest car chase you could possibly imagine in a comic book and have it be badass and cool.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good one. Well, my thing is the reason I would never do a car chase is because I hate drawn vehicles. So like I remember I was kind of going on my way back when I was working on this one comic. I was going on my way to make this cool, distinct looking vehicle, this like like war rig kind of thing. And I was like, okay, I gotta give him an excuse to be away from this thing for a lot because I suck at drawn vehicles. Why did I make this such a big part of the story? So for this right here, though, I will say I did feel like it is like because reading it, I was like, oh, they're dedicating this much to like the car chase because usually I feel like a car chase in like a standard superhero thing, it's like maybe a page of seeing the car zoom around or whatever, and then we get like then we get to wherever they're going. We're here. I feel like it's basically the whole issue is this car chase. And it goes by quickly, but at the same time, like it did feel a little stilted, but all the artwork in it's awesome. And how like it goes right through Central Park for a second, and just the reason the chase is happening in the first place is their car is mistaken by someone who just got into who just did a robbery.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, oh, just April O'Neil's just in here. She's the one driving the whole way through. It's just like she met these guys, and next thing you know, just all hell's breaking loose, and she's just got to take care of them. And yeah, they're just going through and they're running from the cops, and it's just a big old action scene and so on. And it's kind of funny because actually I was thinking about it because I was literally reading this like simultaneously when I was reading this book. I've been reading more of Gunsmith Cats, which is like a 90s manga one that's the best way to say it is that there's a guy in Japan that just wanted to make a hard-boiled Chicago police action movie. And like American style, but like did it, in manga. So it's pretty badass. But there was one in there. It was like, God, there was one that was like, it was like 3 manga issues long car chase. It was like, holy crap, that's a ton of cars to draw.
3 volumes or three chapters?
Yeah, 3 issues. So.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say.
Yeah, no, not like Dragon Ball Z level car chase.
You have 5 minutes to get out of the city, like 25 episodes later.
Yeah, one of those ones. But yeah, it was going through like 3 issues or so of it, and it was just like, wow, that's still like just a ton of cars that to draw. That's like always the thing. It's like, drawing a car, once or twice. That's one thing. But the more times you got to draw a car, it's like, okay, now I got to find places to go there and so on. And I've kind of learned that like the thing when it comes to drawing cars is you find a 3D model so you can look at it from any angle, or if you have even like a toy model or something like that, that's almost the way they have it, is because so you could always see what the heck it looks like every single time it moves and turns and what sides you're looking at and so on.
I guess that's where it comes in help. If you're like doing if it's like a very slapsticky thing, like a Looney Tune cartoon, like, hey, your car looks really shitty and bendy right here. Well, it's supposed to. It's kind of a Looney Tunes thing. Like a look around the corner, like, all right.
Yeah, like you got to stretch and stuff. Well, I mean, you
perfect
could
excuse.
You could have that, I guess, via depending on how you're going with it, if you make it real like action oriented. But yeah, this car scene here, it's just like it's just impressive, just the way it kind of goes. I think that's the thing about all these early issues they do is like they never kind of just like cheapen out in this one. It's like they always kind of like they're going hard on each issue, doing almost really challenging things, for right off the bat for a comic book.
Well, it's also because this issue ends like they're going to stay at April's. So I'm like, all right, they're already getting into that plot point from Ninja Turtles: Secret of the Ooze right there. So okay, and then like we see splinters found and then the people that find them are actually Krangs inside robot bodies. And I'm like, we're already jumping into Krang shit?
That's what I mean. Is like just in this like first like omnibus alone. If you go through all this stuff, it's like it's like their story moves hardcore. I mean, like it's just one of those ones they just keep going, and I think that's just the kind of cool thing about it is it doesn't just. It's almost like they probably almost could milk stuff a little bit longer. You probably could have that Splinter thing go on for a couple extra issues. You could probably have the Baxter Stockman one even go on for a couple extra issues. But I almost give them credit for just how fast they sort of take it. There's always just some new, fresh ideas coming up, And even with like the Mousers and so on like that, because I think Peter Laird's just really good at drawing all like those robots and so on. I think that's what they've always kind of said. But he makes those cool robots and machines, and as they get all the futuristic stuff, you get all that kind of neat stuff coming in, like almost like that kind of New Gods looking technology.
Yeah. I think if that's sometime, I wonder if when we get to Dimension X, if we're going to see that very Jack Kirby like space dust sparkle stuff that he likes to do.
Well, that's like if I don't know, because your versions might not have, but these ones they have like special features in between like each issue, and that's like their number one thing is that they just want to be Jack Kirby more than anything else. Like that's like both those guys kind of came together because they loved Jack Kirby so much. So that's why everything has those square, blocky kind of looks and everything like that. And then that
makes so much sense now that you say that.
And then you throw the Ronin on top of it, and I think that was kind of what they're doing because Ronin was also one of the big influences / kung fu movies and all that other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Did they went up to 62 issues, or did it kind of like end at some? Did it go like past that? I mean, I know they had reboots and whatnot and other versions, but I guess I'm looking on this site right here. Did they go past 62 issues?
I think that might be where it stops at because I think there's 6 omnibuses that I have because the last omnibus is just technically like an art book, like it's just excess covers and bonus things like that. But I want to say there's 6 or 7 books, and they generally have all their kind of stuff. But after about they technically stop sort of. I want to say by about book 3 or 4 is when they kind of generally stop even drawing because it starts to become like okay. What happens as the process goes on in this is, okay, right now they're doing the thing where they both write and draw together. And that's how it is. As time goes on, they start doing the thing where Peter does one issue with another guy and Kevin does an issue with another guy or so. And so they're able to, in a sense, do more issues quicker because, well, one person works on one issue, the other person works on another, and they kind of leapfrog back and forth. But then as time goes on, then it almost feels like they're doing less of the drawings and somebody else is coming in. And I get it. You have the money and you want to make it easier. You want to do almost the fun part of creating. But it's just like, as I said, their artwork and it does that kind of like that thing there. It's such a neat kind of way to go about it.
Yeah. I mean, I could see why though, when you got something that much going in and you just like, you know what? I only have so much time. Let me get somebody who can draw this stuff quicker than me. I totally understand that.
Yeah. But because it's like myself. It's like I know I'm definitely not the fastest like artist, like because that's what I always try to think about. Like when I see those things where those manga guys pump out like 19 pages. Granted, there's 3 or 4 probably other like poor souls sitting there that they're never credited in those books. That's what I always think about. Like there's always like in a sense those ghost artists and writers that kind of or whatever that sit underneath that like because you're not Bob Kane on the cover, you don't get credited. But in Japan.
That's anybody Bob Kane worked with.
Yeah, but in Japan, all those Bill Fingers running around Japan, they never get credited. There's a lot of Bill Fingers going on there.
A lot of Bill Fingers in Japan. Yeah.
A lot of Bill Fingers getting the finger, but
they're just like, put out your hand. Like what? The tea is cold. Put out your hand. But I just got it. It's not to my liking. Put out your hand. Just like stabs his finger, stabs his hand with the pen. Like we'll do it right this time, right? Next time it's your drawing hand.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny because it's hard, so hard to get that information like out of like Japanese stuff. Like the closest I remember, there was a Rumiko book, the lady who does Inuyasha and Rama One Half and all that stuff. Is she had this one book I have where she just does a bunch of short stories. And in one of them, it shows like you could just tell that this was probably where she was working at, like in the 70s, where like there's just this guy who thinks he's the best manga creator ever. But then it showed all like the other team around him, how they're just getting treated like shit. and so on like this. And this guy was just like a maniac kind of thing. I'm like, that right there, that probably gave me all the information I need to know about most of these places. That's how many people are in that studio. Where like I think in the US generally everybody mostly gets some form of credit, unless you're getting paid under the table or something like that.
Wondering if I'm not wondering what anime that or what manga that was. Like, was that like the guy who did like G-Force or some shit like that? Or
all I know is I'm like she probably took some story from like, because you forget kind of almost how old she is, but like from like the mid 70s or something like that, and whoever the heck she was working with before she got to do her own stuff. I just felt like there was some built up anger towards this person here.
Does she kill him in the end?
No, I don't think. Well, God, no. Well, there is.
Yeah,
I want to say that book is like the dude literally gets a hold of like some device that like kills, because he starts killing his own employees with this like weird mythical thing, like some cursed like monkey hand type stuff, and in the process. Because it's been a while since I read it, but like in the process, like when he says like something while holding this like object, it like actually comes true. And like one of the artists comes like blind like the next day. One of them comes in like that, like whenever he gets pissed off and says something with this thing.
Huh. I'm kind of curious. I was never an Inuyasha fan, but now I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, no, this book was pretty cool. It's just literally like it's just like all these like short stories jammed into one manga. But yeah, that's kind of it there. But yeah, going back to Ninja Turtles and all that good stuff, we go to the final issue that we read here, which is the Raphael one-shot miniseries, which is the one that I think it really kind of, we get Raphael pretty well, explained in this, but this is where it kind of gets a lot more. But this is the issue where you get Casey Jones. So like literally in these 4 issues, we've gotten like the full bread and butter of like all the core Ninja Turtle stuff.
Yeah, and even Casey Jones kind of coming in like, oh, this is directly their meeting in the movie. This is like the movie even took this issue and just slapped it in there. And they like, because sometimes you think like movies never get it that accurate back in that time. And now you look at this like, oh, this movie was very accurate, especially for this time.
That's what I thought too. I remember the first time I read this book, I was like, dude, wow, that movie, like it's one of those ones, like I almost gave me way more appreciation for the movie and for the choices, because I used to always think the one thing that was kind of weird was, in the movie, how it's like Splinter has that thing where he's like, as a rat, I watched Amada Yoshi, and I practiced his moves and things like that.
The Jim Henson puppet thing.
Yeah. And I used to always go, man, that seems a little bit hokey. Even as a kid, I was like, because the origin, I think, I will say the origin in the cartoon's a little bit more interesting, because Amada Yoshi or whatever,
he became a rat.
Yeah, he is Splinter and stuff, and so they just kind of fuse the rat in together, and then it's like, when the ooze is spilled and all that kind of stuff, it's like, the turtles, because they were hanging out with the humans, they became more human-like, and because I was hanging out with the rats, I became rat-like. In that kind of logic, I was like, yeah, it makes more sense. Where I always felt like the kung fu kicking rat thing is kind of a bizarre one, but it's in the comic, so then it's like, well, okay, it's in the comic. I will actually give that a lot more like passing now in that movie.
Yeah. And just it's kind of like that, you have Casey Jones watching like Dirty Harry and all that, and just like lifting weights while watching the TV. I'm just thinking back. I know we've been talking more about the effect Ninja Turtles has had in other versions, but comparing it to like the other movies though, like, because Casey Jones in my mind has always been like a working class guy who has not really had things all together, but he's really good at crime fighting. And just seeing this right here, I understand sometimes you want to take creative liberties, but the last live action movie they did, they had Arrow playing Casey Jones, where he put on the mask for one scene and hit someone with a hockey stick or some bullshit. And then like he says like, I want to become a security guard in a prison. I want to like beat the shit out of prisoners. That sounds like fun to me. And then like in this where you see he's a guy who does not have his life together. He's like lifting weights and all that. Like, wow, they really got him wrong in that movie.
I know, that was such a bummer too, and it's like I felt like I'm drawing like the Green Arrow's name, but that guy could play it well. I think. I know he's a little too much of a pretty boy, because I think the thing of this, because Casey Jones to me is one of the coolest superheroes ever created in comics. Like I almost even like him more than the Ninja Turtles himself, because I think the thing that makes him such an interesting character is that he is the superhero that is like the blue collar like hero, where it's almost that thing that, hey, you don't got to have money, you don't got to be well educated, you just got to, to train yourself the best you can, you know what I mean? Use what you got in your own garage. You got some hockey sticks laying there. You got a bunch of sports equipment, baseball bats, cleats, pads, all this stuff. And you can go out and fight crime in New York. And you know what I mean? Like, I think just the thing about him is he's like the most believable superhero that's probably almost ever been created. Like that guy right here is like, that guy is the blue collar savior. And especially like in the olden days when he's still like, has long hair and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I know in the comics, he's got more like the spiky kind of like wild man hair, but, just the thing about that character, I just think is always one of the coolest ones. His look is really badass and everything like that. And it's just that thing that's like, you might not ever be able to be Batman, but you could always be Casey Jones.
You need a nice bank account to be Batman. Let's be real.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. So that's the thing. It's like, mostly every other superhero, it's like, there's not like those kind of guys. It's like, it's even other ones too. It's even like Punisher. Well, yeah, but he's military trained and all this kind of stuff. Casey Jones, listen, that's the thing. Is he's just a guy who just worked with what he got. You know what I mean? He did it his way, the closest thing to him is Tyler from like Martin Scorsese's Taxi. No.
You say Tyler Durden. No, he doesn't blow anything up, but I mean, he is
because he's just another personality. But what's that's his name, right? No, am I drawing a blank on his name?
Oh, Travis.
Yeah, Travis from Taxi. That's like the closest thing, because he's kind of almost in a similar thing of kind of like Casey
Travis Bickle. Travis Bickle from he just kind of like, only it's not like he's a little bit more on edge, because Travis Bickle, like, he doesn't take April to like a foreign porn film on their first date, being like, I thought you'd like this. Like, why would I like this? I don't know. I just thought you'd like it. I just like he's not doing that shit. But doesn't show up to her work at Channel 6 News the next day. Bad things happen to bad people. Like in Turtles, like, you need us to step in, April. Like, I'm good, Donnie. We're good.
I just love how there's just some weird fucking choices in Taxi, but I think that's almost what makes that character.
And then the studio audience laugh track, yeah.
Because in this one here, it's literally like the scene straight out of the first movie. Except for Casey Jones is going out there with more of like a bitter, like I'm here to clean the scourge of the earth. Like he's literally going full Punisher. And Raphael's like, whoa, I thought I was the hothead, but dude, you're even worse.
I tried to kill my brother 5 minutes ago, but this is too much, dude.
Yeah, like I was contemplating, like, man, maybe I gotta just off myself because I'm a dangerous risk to my family. But then I see this fucker out here.
Like, whoa. Put the tennis racket down.
But in the process, they get a badass battle and whatnot like that, and just like knocking each other around the park, just beating each other up, like almost like kind of the equivalent of like a They Live like slobber knock fight, where it just keeps going on, and just when you think it's over, it rolls again.
Well, that fight, because it's mostly him, because all the shit with him and his brothers happens within the first like 4 pages, give or take. He's like, I'm such a fuck up, I hate everything, and then from there, we see Casey, and then Raph intervenes, and then it goes from just them chasing each other, fighting each other, chasing each other, fighting each other, and they agree to like work together to stop crime on the very last page.
Yeah, because they somebody like calls out or something like that, and they're like, you know what? Let's agree to disagree with our points on this. As long as there's no killing, because that's what Batman would do. No killing. Not Punisher going on here. And then they join forces.
Ben Affleck Batman. He's just
yeah,
just like fucking just icing motherfuckers left and right.
Or Batman Returns Batman, where you just strap a bomb to a guy and chuck him over a bridge.
Smile. Yeah. Set like do a wheelie, set the flames out, set a clown on fire, just keep driving, flip the bird.
Exactly, but oh my gosh. But yeah, these issues are so much fun. They're more. It's like we read 4 issues, but they're definitely longer. Like each one's like at least 30 or 40 pages. They're almost like equivalent of like double issues, you know. So it's like it definitely is a full story of all this kind of stuff here, and just the origins of it is something that I think that more Turtles fans need to read these books. Like, because that's the thing is you'll meet people that like I like Ninja Turtles, but I know there's people out there that love Ninja Turtles like 15 times more than I do, 20 times more than I do, but they still have never read these books.
Yeah. No, I get you. I think I'm glad we read it. I'm going to continue reading these because I have access to the other ones, so I'm going to go on and see as far as I can go. For a while there's also the kind of a reboot put out by IDW, like where it was like PG-13 Turtles, like rebooted comic, separate universe that came out like in around like I think 2010, 2011, around that time. I wouldn't mind. I had the first volume. I don't know what happened to it, but I had the first volume and I liked it, but I just never got around back onto it. I wouldn't mind getting the omnibuses for that and checking that out down the line because apparently those have nothing but good reviews.
Yeah, that'd be cool stuff to check out. I also noticed recently too, there is speaking of the 87 show, they did just do like an issue that kind of like is like in the vein of that style, kind of the way that they did with like, a different company, but
X-Men
like
92.
Yeah, like X-Men 92. And I was gonna say the Power Rangers also had that too, where like it was just straight up like Power Rangers 93. It was almost like the best way to say it is like it reminded me like the way that you remember Power Rangers, not necessarily how when you go back, it's a little bit hokey, like the way that your like 5-year-old mind and 6-year-old mind sort of remember Power Rangers. That's how those books were, and they're written by Kyle Higgins, who did Nightwing for quite a long time.
There's actually Udon. I don't know if it's IDW or Udon. Maybe it's a joint project, but there is a Street Fighter meets TMNT comic series coming out. I think they're already on issue 2 right now. So
that's an interesting one right there. Like,
I mean, they're both big. They were both big in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, so I mean, it makes it. Well, it's in the kung fu, like that kind of, martial arts mayhem of like the 80s, early 90s version of it. So yeah, there's all that kind of stuff that's like I would like to read more Turtles. As I said, like the Eastman and Laird stuff's just so cool just for what it is. It's just that there's just something so unique about it. And you could tell that like if you would have caught these books, like if you would have been that person that ran around a Comic-Con in like the 80s and you caught this before Ninja Turtles was a thing, like this would have been that thing where you're like, holy shit, this thing is fucking awesome. Like you can kind of see how one person tells another friend, and it starts just passing along. And I mean, I will say it does have the greatest like marketing, because I think that title alone is just like, it's that kind of book that like all you have to do is see that title and you're like, I got to see what this is. Even if the thing's bad, I want to know.
And you had things that are trying to do the extra weird thing, but they couldn't really just to kind of nail it, like biker mice from Mars or whatever. Like, you can't just do a word salad and hopefully to get a multi-million-dollar franchise.
Well, it's funny how many like knockoff books there sort of is. That's just like, the mutant rats from, like this. And there's tons of them out there. I remember
Street Sharks.
Yeah. There's
not name wise, but yeah, definitely.
There's this cool guy named Ray who always has a bunch of comic books and so on like that. And he came across a big fat collection of all like the miscellaneous knockoff books from like the late 80s that were all just like people threw words together with animals and tried to see if they could kind of get it going. Yeah. Then you have ones like, I feel like Street Sharks and Battletoads. Those are the ones that like they're Ninja Turtles knockoffs, but they at least did it with like its own sort of style. They weren't just straight up like let's get this wordplay going, and try to see if it'll work out and try to be as bizarre as possible,
Genghis Frog is apparently supposed to be like a parody of the Battletoads.
Really?
Yeah.
Battletoads is one of those ones. I always wish there was more Battletoads in life, because that one, like, it's weird. That original run of Battletoads is all of like 2 years, and that's like it's like 91 or whatever. Maybe it's 90. Maybe it's 3 years. 90 to 93, I want to say, and that's all Battletoads.
The game was first, right?
Yeah, so there's like there's the game. Well, there's a pilot cartoon. There's the Game Boy game, the Nintendo game, the Genesis game, and the Super Nintendo game, and then the Battletoads and Double Dragon. Oh, and the arcade game. So there's like 5 games in total, and then it's like that's it, and it never comes back until they do that one. There's that one that came out on Xbox One, but the only downfall to it is like, at least to me, it's like they gave it like the best way to sort of say it, like a Nickelodeon kind of like if Nickelodeon took over Battletoads and they put their spin on the cartooning of it. So it made
probably doing the Ninja Turtles thing. Probably they probably just saw they're trying to pull the same card from before.
Yeah, so instead of looking kind of cool and badass, it's almost like too wacky and stupid and silly looking. And it's just like, it's not a bad game. It's just, but it's like one of those ones where it's just like, it sort of takes like a classic fan. It's like, it's that thing where
they had one of them in Killer Instinct, didn't they?
Yeah, Killer. Well, because that's Rare. Rare makes all Battletoads. So it's kind of weird to think that like that's like that pre-time where Rare was like out like, you know, messing around with other companies and so on. Nintendo's like, no, you get back to the family. Don't you dare fucking go selling shit to Sega anymore.
The fuck are you doing? What are you talking to him? What are you talking? Like Mario just pulls up, opens the door, get in the car. No, get in the fucking car. Drive it home. Like when I fucking table, I hang on the hedgehog. I say, stay away from the hedgehog and stay away from that dirt fuck Bandicoot. All right? What the fuck did I tell you about that? What are you without me? You're fucking nothing without me.
Exactly. But yeah, just too much good stuff here. Ninja Turtle stuff. I mean, Ninja Turtle's just always fun. It's like that thing that like you always kind of forget how good it is until like you kind of always go back and you're like, that is so good. It doesn't matter whether it be a movie, a game, comic book, or something like that. It would be fun to definitely do more of these issues because I would love to read through even farther into this original series. I feel like it makes for good podcast stuff. As I said, from this point on, like this right here was like the kind of like the solidified, hey, here's the stuff used in movie 1, movie 2, the original comics, and so on there. As we start getting farther on, we start to get through some like the really kind of like random stuff and some bizarre things. And then we get to these cool story arcs and everything like that. And even like outer space, other dimensions. I mean, they just go ham on this stuff like right off the bat, which is really cool.
Yeah, like I don't know what we're doing next week. Maybe we can do another one of these. Maybe we'll do something else. We'll figure it out between here and there. But yeah, I one way or another, I'll probably keep on reading these because I am enjoying it. It is kind of interesting to see all these things. Like, because I assumed Krang, like, well, that's got to probably come by at least issue 10. Like, no, issue 3. So,
Yeah.
like issue 10 was being like charitable in my mind. I'm like, well, they got to deal with Shredder. They got to probably deal with a couple of like Garlic Jr. style villains between him, and then they probably get to Krang. Like, no, Krang's already here. Krang's already just walk around the sewers. Like, oh look, a rat, take it. Yeah,
exactly. So there's all that stuff there, but yeah, I think we should do more fun stuff like this as we go down the line. But till then, go to oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, comic books like Pizza Boys, old animations, and all that fun stuff. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes,
and I'm Ryan Dunnigan,
and we'll see you some other time.
Later, folks.